sometimes it looks, the overviews give the impression that everybody knows, but most of the time the experience is that is not the case. And also within the sector, if you are a farmer, most of the time you have no clue where your product is moving to. You have even processors have no clue sometimes where they source from, except for the trader, etc., etc. You gave a good impression. You also gave a good overview on the challenges that we have, like the unorganized or still very informal traders-oriented part, the lack of traceability, issues like living income, deforestation, climate change. Just as you also mentioned, I will start, and I saw that quite a number of questions, interesting questions were raised, and I will get to that later. You mentioned the EU. Do you see, in fact, because I hear the question quite a lot in the sector, is what the EU is demanding, is that an opportunity or a threat?
Oh,
how do you
I
see
think
that?
it's a big opportunity. This is a big opportunity to really put to work on sustainability. I see this as a big opportunity because it allows us to really think through what is working well, what we need to pay attention to, and actually correct them, because these are very important, not only for EU, but even for us, for the farmers, for the processors, to be a sustainable supplier of cashews. So I see this as a huge opportunity, and it is just the beginning. And I think that when we get to the level, when we are able to prepare ourselves, we will see the big benefits that will follow.
Okay, thank you. I will. I saw some interesting questions. I will mention the names of the people who put them, also to honor them, because they seriously raised the question. I saw one interesting one of 𝗪𝗧𝗪𝗧𝗪𝗧𝗪𝗧. He questions what are the off-takers doing, the cashew kernel buyers? Do they contribute to the value chain in making it more sustainable? He compared it with the cocoa industry, where, of course, all the large companies at the end of market are visible. What is happening in the cashew sector? Could you elaborate on that a bit, Mary?
Yes, thank you very much, Yao, for your questions. I think it's a very important question in the sense that we see different levels of engagement of buyers at this stage. The first is that I have explained that Asia is processing most of the cashews, and the topic of sustainability, as Ernest mentioned during his opening, is that we have looked at this, but not very extensively for cashew for a long time. And the Sustainable Nut Initiative, this is their goal, to really bring the topic of sustainability on the table so we can have more engagement. Now, Yao, be aware that for cocoa, is really good to compare. And I'm always happy to learn about the sustainability drive of the cocoa sector, but these are two separate value chains. If you look at cocoa, the chain is a bit, in my mind, straightforward, in the sense that we have fewer buyers, and the buyers are mostly Europeans who are driving. As you can see, you saw on the presentation, it's Europe that is driving the sustainability. And therefore, I imagine it could be easier. In the cashew sector, we have a lot of actors, we have a lot of intermediaries, we have the cashew going to Asia and then being processed. And the market, as we see now, only EU is actually very much engaged on this topic. So the engagement level is less than that of cocoa, Yao. And the purpose of this webinar series is to really sensitize everybody and to bring more people on board so that we can really tackle this topic better in a more holistic way.
Thanks, Mary. Another one, completely different one from 𝗪𝗧𝗪𝗧𝗪. She would like to know more about, say, the working conditions in the processing industry, and she mentions especially the issue on the caustic burning when you crack manually. And she asked whether there are efforts to introduce safer equipment or protective gear for these workers.
Thank you very much, Herman, and thank you to Bless. I think I got her name or his name right. Thank you for this question, because I see this in the media. Especially in the past, we have seen reports from some origins where this has been an issue. In cashew, in Africa, for example, where we started the African Cashew Initiative, this was already some 10 years ago, the training efforts that have been put in place is to ensure that this is not an issue. And therefore, processors, workers are trained. There are three things we do in the factory that ensure that this is not happening. Number one is that workers are using gloves to process. However, sometimes it feels uncomfortable to them, so not everybody, or sometimes they are not wearing gloves. And to ensure that there's no problem with 𝗪𝗧𝗦, we call it 𝗪𝗧𝗦, the cashew nut shell liquid is not negatively impacting on their skin. We also have, if you have ever visited a cashew factory, you see that you have oil, maybe coconut oil or some vegetable oil that workers put on their hand to really protect their hand. And when this is done, there's no issue. So this is the training that is provided to workers, especially in Africa, because I am working in Africa and I have visited many factories. So this is how this issue is addressed, either by wearing gloves or by putting the hand in oil. Machines, I'm sorry to tell you, Blaise, that machines are not yet efficient for cashew processing. So if you talk to a processor, they'll tell you that part of the work is always done by hand. And this is why we need to protect the hand, and this is why we do it in these two ways. So machines will basically support with doing part of the work, but cashew remains partly a manual work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary, as well. Martin Akiman, he was asking, and he's thanking you also as well for the presentation. He is asking whether the sector is already aware and does enough at this moment in time to address deforestation and biodiversity, and what is happening in that part.
Yeah, Martin, good to hear from you. Thanks for joining also the meeting, the webinar. So the sector is not fully informed. I think we have been paying attention to increasing the yields, increasing the production, because I think when I joined Cashew, then African Cashew Initiative, the key issue was supply demand. How do we ensure, because the demand was growing, people just love cashew, they consume it, it's tasty, crunchy, nutritious, and all very healthy. So how do we ensure that there is enough production to really meet the market? That had been the big goal. So the topic, we were looking at really to how to work towards that, because the yields in Africa are low, as you know. Brazil is no longer a major production area. India is consuming more and more, so therefore Africa has to produce more, for example, to feed the market. So the concentration, the focus had been on higher yield, best practices, good agricultural practices. Deforestation, I think we as a sector, we haven't done enough in this area, and this is also, again, the reason we want to do more sensitization and see as a sector how to address this. The other element is that we don't have enough data to really be able to quantify if there is deforestation at all, and whether this deforestation is due to cashew or something else, mango or whatever. We need data, and this is lacking. And this is why I also mentioned research is very important for the sector if we want to really address these topics of sustainability. Yeah.
I fully agree with you, Mary. I think, fortunately, there is more attention to it. There has been some research, especially on the booming countries like Ivory Coast and Cambodia, but there's still a lot to be done, and that is very clear. Kim is raising a question. Thanks for sharing your knowledge, Mary. What would you currently see as the biggest challenge to get to a more sustainable supply chain? So now you have to pick one in order to get moving, Mary. Could you enlighten us your opinion on this one?
Yeah. My opinion is that the topic of transparency and traceability is the most crucial, because if we can address this topic of traceability, transparency, then we can have more information, more data on what exactly are we really having problem, or is there any challenge on workers' living income? how much, to what extent is the problem of living income? To what extent is the problem of deforestation? To what extent? So I think for me, the biggest topic is transparency and traceability. It's the same thing. If we address that, I believe strongly that we can address, or we can have more data to address the other issues.
But because Kim is also asking, how would you overcome it? So if you have a traceability system in place, so we know exactly where, say, each nut is coming from, how would it help us?
Yeah, so first of all, one person cannot do this. Kim, you saw the long chain, very fragmented. We are not necessarily talking to each other yet in terms of sustainability. We talk on, I want to buy cashew, what is the price, but we're not discussing sustainability together. So it's a huge work, first of all, because we need to make sure everybody in the chain really understands this topic. But the other element, as you saw, is that not every market at this stage is having any regulations or legislation on this topic. So first of all, we need to reflect, decide, and I invited the EU in this sense that as the driving force, we need to clearly define how we want to go about it. There's no one way to doing this, but I believe strongly that we need to reflect on that, outline how we want to do it, who should be involved, how do we involve the other regions that are not yet talking about sustainability, and take few decisions on how we want to address this. It has to take place, otherwise it will be difficult to, but I know it's possible when we have the data, it gives us more information, but we still, again, I see we need one body, or we need a body that is actually collecting the data, saying what does it mean for the whole sector, and actually comparing the data in terms of where the best practices are and how that is supporting the industry.
Thanks, Mary. A delicate one. It's always a delicate one, and that is, you mentioned it as well in your setting, but Genevieve Marshall Ufumu is asking it as well regarding child labor. It is mentioned in this chat on that probably the risk is very high. You mentioned something else, so I would like to have your opinion about it. As cashew growing is a high workforce demand activity, do you share that, or do you have a different opinion on that one?
Thank you. So child labor is about having children doing a work that is above them. That's, if you look at the age, this work is too much for that child, or that child is deprived of going to school and not be able to do their normal work as a child. So if you look at it this way, we have done some spot check, and I believe that child labor is not prominent in the sector. Cashew is produced by families, so therefore they go to the farm. However, what we have observed so far is that children are supporting, maybe in picking the nuts, which they sometimes will sell for themselves or for their parents. But that is not a work that is above the child. This is where we have observed mostly children supporting in terms of picking the nuts. But when it comes to child labor, you have to assess what is a child doing that makes it a child labor. If picking a nut, I think it's not only about the cashew sector. If a child is supporting to pick the nut, this is not a work that is above. We will talk about child labor when that work we think is too much for that child, for their age, and we have not observed that in the cashew sector. In addition, I would like to say that, again, we need more data. We have not observed. That's my first statement. Secondly, I think that more studies, more research should also reveal if and to what extent child labor might be available. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Mary. And I agree, we have to be aware, although we should also be careful, not because it's a very delicate subject, not to create the image that it's there if it's not there. So we need to know, and if it's there, then we have to work around it. I have one last question, also looking at the time. And to be frank, I seriously liked it because it's a promising one. It's about the future. It's about how youngsters would like to see that we are moving towards. It's coming from 𝗟𝗘𝗧𝗦'. He is asking how we could also support mechanization in the farming part, especially for the young ones. What is your opinion on that one, Mary?
Yeah, this is a topic I love so much because I believe strongly that when we are able to mechanize, especially also cashew production, I think processing is growing. The mechanization at the process side is growing and is evolving. Now, when it comes to the production side, it's mainly manual. And this is where I see the need for mechanization. Now, for young people to be able to go into mechanization, I think this is possible. My observations are that it's difficult for farmers to reorganize their farms. We have in the past done annual yield surveys where we are looking at the farming structure, how to really reorganize it, but sometimes it's difficult to reorganize because these are tree crops and farmers are sometimes reluctant to cut down those trees. The other element is land tenure system. So I will say that if first of all, if a young person or when a young person decides to go into farming, it's possible. In various countries, we have new planting materials that are available. They should start from scratch planning. I think they start with the planning that they want to have a farm that a tractor can drive in, a farm that can be harvested in a different way that we are doing now. I remember that 𝗟𝗘𝗧𝗦𝗛 in Cote d'Ivoire was developing a tool, for a simple tool for harvesting cashews. But if you look at the structure, the current structure is more difficult. So starting from scratch, think through, plan how to really mechanize the farm. That has been the first step. And for existing farms, we continue to do the sensitization. And I believe that we can get to a point where farmers are willing to do this mechanization, but the farming structure will have to change. The way we plant the farms currently will have to change so that it is more modern and we are able to mechanize it.
Thank you, Mary. And I'm looking at the time, and it's very good to see there are still questions coming up in the Q&A. So, but I think we have to close for this moment. But the chat will remain open for the next 30 minutes, so people can still continue and also network jointly. Thank you very much, Mary, for this overview. I think it's a seriously good overview. And I'm sure that some might have seen, I knew this already, because they have been in the sector and in the total sector for a long period, but I'm also very sure that it gave a very good overview on what is happening, how complex this supply chain is, how long, intraceable, informal, and that we have a huge challenges ahead. But we can also make those challenges and reverse them, as you mentioned as well, into opportunities. Because if you make your supply chain sustainable, you should not do that for somebody else. You should do that for yourself in order to improve your own production, in order to be more climate resilient, to be more interesting for buyers and off-takers. I think that is the reason why you should do it. And let's try to see how we can make use of what is happening. Of course, in this part, there was a lot of issues that we need to deal with. And of course, that it was good to do that in the first webinar. In the next ones, we're going to be more in depth, like Mary was saying as well, on the issues. And we would like to get some people on board on how to solve them and how to deal with it, in order also to share the best practices. And the best practice does not mean that it was a walk in the park. Most of the time, it has been a struggle. It has been an investment, and sometimes you were not even paid for it. So we will get to that in the next webinars, and we haven't chosen yet the right setting, but it will definitely be on issues like traceability, like you have mentioned, direct sourcing. I would say it has not been mentioned in that way, but I know it's in your head as well. Deforestation will definitely be an issue, and also to see how we can do this jointly in the supply chain. There is no such thing as moving ahead just on your own. There's an African saying, if you would like to go fast, go on your own. And if you would like to go far, and sustainability is a far walking distance, you have to do it jointly. Thank you very much again, and thank you very much also the audience. It was good to see that people stayed. It's very nice for us to see how many people joined. There were over 100, and we are still there. So it also means that people found it interesting. That is one of the first critics you always see if people drop out. They did not. So that is very good. Thank you, ACA, as a partner in this setting for making this jointly able, and as well as Cashew and the EU ACP. Looking forward to see you again at the end of March, and have a good day. Until then, bye-bye.